This is question 27 from section 1 of the 2014 BMAT, and this question asked what conclusion can be drawn from the argument. So let's remind ourselves, if we're looking for a conclusion that could be drawn, that's something that hasn't already been said but does follow from what's in the passage. So let's have a look at the passage. First, the writer says that motor vehicles aren't the only threat to pedestrians. So with that context, that could be a factual statement or an opinion, but it's actually backed up by the evidence they're about to give, so we'll treat it as a fact. And they say cyclists seriously injured 21 pedestrians per billion kilometres travelled, and that's compared to 24 per billion kilometres for motor vehicles. So these are statistical facts. And they say, although pedestrians see cyclists on the pavement as a problem, actually most collisions with cyclists happen when the pedestrian steps into the road and don't see them. So this is just describing how accidents happen, that's a fact. And lastly, they say that over the 10 years to 2012, cyclists killed 23 pedestrians and seriously injured 585 pedestrians. So more statistics. So it's one of those draw conclusion questions where everything is a fact. Although it does actually seem like the first sentence is basically a factual conclusion based on these, or at least a summary of that information. So let's leave this alone and just note the data it's drawn from, that cyclists, so do the particular numbers matter? What really seems to matter is they injure around as many people per billion kilometres travelled as motor vehicles do. And then the next sentence says most collisions happen when a pedestrian steps into the road, and the last one basically tells us that, so I'll note the numbers, but what really seems to matter is just that cyclists kill some people and injure some people. The exact values really aren't normally important in these draw conclusion questions. And then from these facts we're meant to draw our conclusion. Actually, we'll see there's several options, and it could be more than one as a conclusion that can be drawn. So it's not necessarily that all this data forms a single cohesive argument. It might be that we draw one of the options as a conclusion from some part of the information and another from another part. So let's just have a look at the options one by one and see how they relate to all of this data. So first let's look at option 1. That says pedestrians are about as likely to be injured by cyclists as by motor cars or motor vehicles. So does that seem like a conclusion we can draw? Well, at first it does, because isn't that basically what the first sentence is saying? But actually no, the first, or it's actually sentence 2, but this first piece of data isn't saying that. It's saying cyclists injure as many per distance travelled as motor vehicles do. But if there were more cars travelling more total distance per year, then that means that as a pedestrian you're more likely to be hit by a car than by a cyclist. So actually, option 1 could only follow if we had more data about how much cyclists and motor vehicles travel, and we don't have that data, so it's too strong, it goes beyond the evidence. And then let's look at option 2. Option 2 says that relative to distance travelled, a cyclist has about the same risk of injuring a pedestrian as a motor vehicle does. Well, actually that does now sound like our summary of the data from sentence 2, and now it's per distance travelled, so it doesn't have the problem that option 1 did. So this does seem like a conclusion we can draw. And lastly, option 3 says pedestrians are less likely to be injured by cyclists on the pavement than they are on the road. So I'll warn you, I actually kind of disagree with the official answers on this one, but see what you think. So the answers say that this is a conclusion we can draw, and I think the reasoning is where it's basically just a summary of sentence 3, like we have here, that most collisions happen when a pedestrian steps into the road. So we'll mark it as a correct answer. Why is it a bit dubious? Well, one reason this is talking about your chance of being injured, and the passage talks about your chance of there being a collision, but it might be that collisions on the road are more or less likely to injure you than collisions on the pavement. And so you can't conclude the likelihood of injury just from the information given. Also, although it's unlikely in this case, if pedestrians spent more time walking into the road than they did walking on the pavement, then even if more collisions happened in the road, it might still be that per time spent walking, you were more likely to be hit on the pavement than the road. So we know from general knowledge that's unlikely in this case, but it does show that we're making some assumptions in drawing this conclusion from the information given. But in any case, the answers they want you to select are 2 and 3, and that corresponds to option E.